And if it's opening your docs in WordPad rather than Word, then just go to the folder where your document is saved, right click on it, and do open with, and you can choose Word 2016. Some people's are opening in WordPad, and then sometimes you don't get the pictures of the code boxes in it. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a new Java project, but when we do so, we're not going to click the thing that says Create Main Class. We're going to deselect it. And the reason for that is that the main method is actually going to be part of the next thing which we add, which is a JFrame form. Hello, hello. So go into NetBeans, choose File, New Project. It's still a Java application. Click Next, but deselect this thing that says Create Main Class. If you accidentally let it make a main class, you're just going to have to delete it anyways. And so what are we going to call this? We're going to call this in, for a short assignment, in array. That sounds more complicated than what it really is, but now we make it over here. We see our source packages and stuff, but there are no files in it. All there is a default package. That's okay. Now we're going to add a JFrame to it. Right click on the thing that says default package, or we can make another package if we wanted to, but and choose JFrame form. And we could give it a class name, or we can just leave it as is. I'm going to leave it as it. No, I already typed over it. Jeff's JFrame with no spaces. And it's giving me a warning that I don't put a Java class in the default package, but for stuff like this, it absolutely does not matter. It just means that there's not going to be a package statement up at the top of the file. Alright, here's my form that we're going to populate with buttons and stuff. If we click on source, we see the source code that supports that form. Some of it is grayed out. There's something that says generated code here. This is NetBeans making all the stuff that will draw that form when we run it. So when I run it, I press the green arrow. Oh. So do that, and you're just about caught up with us. All you have to do now is that we have a JFrame. Go ahead and run it, and we'll just see that it pops up a window that does nothing. But that's actually quite an accomplishment, considering if we had to create all this code by hand. If we had to create all this code by hand, we'd do it in something that looked less like, an alien language. But still, it's nice that it does all that for us. So that was clicking on source. If we go over to design, we can drag buttons out onto the form, and we can drag little text fields that you could fill in and stuff like that. Let's see what the instructions are suggesting we do. Okay, it's wanting us to do something like this. We need 4 text fields. We need, it doesn't even say what this is. This is a text area. I need to put a comment that that is a text area. It needs 1 text area, 4 text fields, and 2 buttons. And you can arrange them how you like, but let's go for it. I know I need 4 text fields, so I'm going to find the text field, not the text area button. We only want one of those. Text field is over here under the swing controls. If you have to expand swing controls, you can. Text field, we need 4 of those. I'm going to put 1 at the top and then 3 down at the bottom. Now I want 1 text area. A text area is a multi-line box, and it'll show a scroll bar if it gets too much text. More text than can be displayed. Okay, so text field 1 is on top, 2, 3, and 4 at the bottom. We need 2 buttons. 1 button next to the JText field on top, and 1 underneath the text area. I have forgotten actually where this is going, so it's like I'm learning with you. Okay. Button 1 I'm going to put up at the top above the text area. And button 2 I'm going to put over here on this side somewhere. I actually showed it above the text field, so I'm going to see if I can mimic that. Now if you want, now don't do this, but if you want, you can drag a panel out there from the swing containers, and you can put stuff in that panel and then drag them all around as a group. So I could, if I so chose, I'm not going to be able to get this to work. I could take the button and those 3 text fields and put them in a container of their own and then just drag that guy around. You don't have to do that. You can't see the container, but if you wanted to change the background color of the container, you can do that. So, notice that when you click on things, some of them have these little wobbly arrows. The gaps between components can be selected and adjusted. When they're springs, that means they're not a fixed width. That means that they're resizable. But you can right-click on it, and I'm not going to change this, but you can right-click on it and do, I think it's Edit Layout Space, and you can say, no, I don't want it to be resized. I want it to be a fixed width, and I always want it to be exactly 50. That means that even if they stretch the window out, that part of it's only going to be 50 wide. Now, in my opinion, when making this kind of thing, there's nothing wrong with letting them expand and contract, so I'm not going to change it from being resizable.
50 what?
Pardon me?
What is the one that says 50? What is it? Pixels?
50 pixels, right, right. If you want to change the appearance of something, you can do that. Like if for some reason I wanted this text field to have a red background, what you do is you right-click on it and choose Properties, and you can find the background setting. It's up there near the top of the properties. So I right-clicked on the properties list, and I can press the ... over here, background. It gives me the value of it. I can click ... and I can pick a different color. How about a cheery tan or yellow? And of course you can make really ugly interfaces really fast with colors. There. That's really obnoxious. I'm probably going to change that back to white. But you can see that you can also pick, colors for the text. You could change the colors of the buttons. You could change the fonts. So you have considerable control over the appearance of it. We want to edit the text of the objects. We want this button to say Add to Array, and we want this button to say Calculate. You know what, I'm thinking this is more going to be an array list than an array. Let me come down here and look, see what we're using. Nope, it's an array. Alrighty. Okay, so I'm going to change the text of button 1 to say Add to Array, and button 2 is going to say Calculate. So right-click on J button and choose Edit Text, Add to Array. Right-click on J button 2 and do Edit Text, and call it Calculate. It's going to add up all the values that have been inserted into the array. Something was occurring to me and my brain flaked. I don't recall now where I was going with this. I mean, following the instructions is where I'm going with it. But oh yeah, you can also right-click on it and change the variable name. Let's not change it yet, but I want you to see what it looks like. Right-click on one of the controls, any of them, and do Change Variable Name. You'll see that the button has the name JButton1, which was its label before. The Calculate button has a different variable name, JButton2. What are those variable names? Go back to the source page now, the source panel. Click off of Design, onto Source, go up to the top, do a Control F for a search, and look for J button 1. Weirdly, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, you'll see all the members of the class. I don't know why it sticks the members down at the bottom rather than the top, but it does. All the stuff in gray is stuff that we can't edit because it's stuff that NetBeans is managing. If we go and we start managing to change this stuff, like if we pop open a text editor and open it behind the scenes, then NetBeans will not be able to keep the form going. You know, we pretty much have broken it and have to do the rest of it by hand at that point. So we can see all the references. Here is a method called init components. I need to make the text larger. You can't see that. I really can't either. Where is fonts and colors? There we go. So init components makes all of the variables. Each button, each shape is its own object. So we can see that it creates a button, it creates the panel. Well, you may not have added a panel, I did. The second button, it creates all the text fields, just like we did with our new keyword. Then it calls set text. Right now our text field just has the name text field. But somewhere else we will see a set text called add to array. The J button is an object that has a whole bunch of different methods, including set text. If you want to see what a J button, all the different things the J button can do, scroll down to the very bottom, highlight this thing that says java x.swing.jbutton, and then view the documentation for it. Click Window. I can't find it there. Right click on it and choose Show Java Doc. And it'll bring up a help page about the J button. Maybe. Or not. Would have been nice. Ever since the machines were formatted, I'm not sure what's going to work and what doesn't. Okay. That then we will see eventually. I scrolled back up to the init components. There is this horrible code here that creates all the objects and adds them to the panel. If you were going to write this program by hand, you would not do it in this fashion. But that's the difference between code that a computer writes and the code that we write. Then down here there's a main. And you can see that all main does is create a new version of the very same object that we're in and run it. I believe that to be true. No, that's not true. It doesn't even create a new version of the window. Something should, though. Yeah, right there. When it clicks Run, it creates a new frame. And it sets it visible. All right. Let's go back to the Design tab. JTextField1, that's a lousy thing to have in there because when they click Add to Array, we don't want to add that text to it. We're going to want to add a number. My guess is that I have us edit it to change that to a 0. I'm not seeing that we do, but I want to do it anyways. Right-click on that thing that says JTextField1 and choose Edit Text, and let's just fill it with a 0. Now that's going to shrink it down. I don't want it shrunk down, so I'm going to pull it back out to a reasonable size. Now this text field 2, text field 3, text field 4, I honestly forget what those are going to be filled with. Oh yeah, one's going to be the max, one's going to be the minimum and stuff like that. Let's also fill these in with zeros and then stretch them back out. So right click on each one, change it to 0, then stretch it back out. This just makes it look better. If a customer sees something pop up and it's got weird names like that, they're going to think you're crazy. And if they see zeros, they're just going to know that that will be filled in. Now a text field can be either display only or input output. We're going to want them to be able to change this text up here so that they can type in new numbers and click Add to Array. These fields, the user should not be able to change them. You can do that in more than one way. I'm just going to leave it alone for now, but I'm mentioning the fact that you can set these to be read-only so that the user can't go and change them. We're going to need 3 pieces of text to describe what these fields are: the minimum, the maximum, and the average. So, click over here and find under Swing Controls label, and drag one out, put it above the first text, double click it, and type minimum. Do the same, grab another label out, put it on top of the second box, and change it to maximum. You can also just right click and do edit text like we were doing before, or you can double click on the text. And so now I have 3 pieces of text, and I'm kind of sorry that I don't know how to zoom this in to make this bigger for y'all. Nope, I believe that to be a true statement. I do not know how to zoom that in. When you want to look at it, there's a little icon up there that says Preview Design. But that's not actually running the program, it's just showing you the user interface. If you want to actually run it, go ahead and press the green button, and it runs it. Now our code doesn't do anything yet. Notice these big scroll bars here. We could make those go away by stretching the text area a little bit larger. So I'm going to come back here, I'm going to grab the text box, see if I can stretch it down. And if that messes everything up and you hate it, just undo it. Well, I got the up and down scroll bar to go away, but the left to right one's not, so I'm going to stretch it a little bit wider. I'm going to run it one more time. There we go. All right. Looks good to me. Are we all about here? Where we've got the texts, we've got our labels, we've got our buttons. How are you doing, Parisa? Okay. Did you say you're good, or?
Yeah, I'm good.
Does good mean you've given up, or good mean you?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, okay. How about you, Andrew? Everything okay? All right. So, we're going to add an array and a counter. Now really where we put those variables doesn't matter. We could go and try to put them down at the bottom where it put the rest of the class members, but I'm just going to recommend that we put it above the init method. We see an init method, well, I don't see an init method here. I don't know why I say that. I need to edit this. Okay, above the constructor then. Above the constructor, we're going to add 2 lines of code. We're going to create an array of 10 objects, and we're going to create a counter that is set to 0. And realistically, I won't even say that. There we go. For a minute, I almost slipped into C, where you should define all of your lengths as a constant. Okay, so how do I get back to the code? I click Source. And I scroll up and down looking for the constructor. And here it is. It's right up at the top where it says creates new form JFrame. We need an array. Int, I forget what my array was supposed to be called. Oh, array is equal to new int 10, and int counter is equal to 0. We could make these private. Nothing else is going to be accessing this, but I'm just going to leave it alone. Now we're going to go back to the designer, and we're going to double click the add button, and it will create a new method to handle it. If you double click right in the middle, it'll probably instead offer to edit the text, which is not really what I want. But if you manage to double click it and not edit the text instead, it's going to open up the source code editor, and we will see that it added a method. This is called an event handler. What it does is somewhere else in the code, it is set up so that if, it's called add action listener, add to JButton1 an action listener, which is listening for the button click, and if somebody clicks on it, then call JButton1 action performed. And we didn't have to write all that, thankfully. To do, add your code here. That's what we're going to do, is we're going to add some code here that will add whatever the user types and add it to our array. First thing we want to make sure is that we don't have too many values in our array. So if counter is greater than or equal to array.length, or even this dot array.length, then we need to pop up an error message. Now we can't just use a print. Why? Because when we run it, where's it supposed to print to? Now in reality, if we run it inside of NetBeans, it will display print statements down here in this output as it always did, but the user's not going to be running it inside of NetBeans. So we don't want to use print or print line or anything. So instead, we're going to pop open a little dialog. JOptionPane.show message dialog. We have to get the capitalization right. J and O on JOptionPane and the P have to be capitalized. So J, capital J, O, capital O, and then the rest of the word option, and then pane, like a window pane, P-A-N-E with a capital P, dot, show message dialog. Show message dialog. It offers us two arguments to fill in. One is the window that this needs to be anchored to. We're just going to put null there. And the other is going to be a text message. Array is full. But if the array is not full, we actually want to add it to the array. Now when you type something in on a form, it's a string. It's retrieved as a string, which means we're going to have to convert it with parse. I'm not sure that that's actually what I had us do, but let's go look. Yeah, it's supposed to get the text out of the field, then it turns it into an integer, then it puts it into the array. So, going back to the source of the button, string s is equal to this dot j text field 1 dot get text. Now I use the ability to select things from the pop-up list, so I didn't have to type as much, and that's why I did this first. Now that we have that string, let's convert it to an integer. Int I is equal to integer.parse int the string. And we're going to hope and pray that they didn't type in any bad data, or else it's going to get an exception. Now let's set that element in our array, element at position counter, equal to the integer we just parsed, and then let's increment counter by 1. Then lastly, it needs to perform some kind of update. I'll go back to that, so that we can actually see that something has changed. What our code is going to do is each time we click add to array, it's going to call a method that builds this text area, fills it full of text, so we can see the contents of the array. So there's always more than one way of doing this, but we need a function. Let's call it update text area. There is no update text area function yet, so we're going to add one. Just double click on that red arrow and say create method. And now go find where it created it. Do a search and look for the word update text area. And put it down at the bottom. Okay. So we need to make a string to hold all the text that the text area is going to hold. I'm just going to call it S. I'm going to set it equal to the word array, followed by a colon, followed by a \n. And now I'm going to write a for loop that will process the array, adding each item in the array to the string. So why not make a for each loop? For every I in the array, for int I space colon array, why did I do it in the most complex way possible there? Let's do S plus equals I followed by a character term, \n. And then we need to update the display with that new string. So this dot JTextArea 1 dot set text, and we're going to set that text area to contain the contents of string S. Now this may actually work. It's not going to display minimum and maximum in anything, but if we do add to array, whoopsie, that's not quite what I expected to see. Oh, I see what it's doing. The array by default was full of zeros, so that's why we got so many zeros.
Did yours compile?
You may have typed yours in as it was in the instructions rather than what I typed. So I should have done it not the way. Let's fix it, guys. Instead of saying for I is in array, let's do for int. I'm going to delete that for line. For int x is equal to 0. We could have used I. X is less than the length of the array. No, x is less than the counter. X plus plus. And then int I is equal to array at position x. So these are the lines that I changed. That one and that one. That'll teach me to wing it. I wanted to be all fancy and use a for each loop. which we could have gotten to work, but it would have looked stupid. Alrighty, we're most of the way there. We want it so that when you press the calculate button, it'll run through it, find the minimum, the maximum, and the average of the array. This is very similar to an assignment we've done. And then to set those 3 text areas. So there's a few things that could go wrong. One is if you press the run button and it doesn't do anything. That's likely if you chose File, New Project, and you started making a new project, but you did not deselect the thing that said Make a Main Class. If you did that, then somewhere over here in your source packages, there's an extra Java file. And if you double click on that file, all you'll see is that it's an empty file, but it has a main method in it, an empty main method. So just right click on that file and delete it. And then when you run it, it'll ask where the new main method is. Just click OK, and then it'll run your file. That's one thing. Another is you may accidentally be adding event handlers for objects other than the buttons. Like if you double clicked on one of the text fields, it creates an event handler for it. But we don't want it to do anything if you click on a text field. Maybe at some stage you would, but not in this application. So you can come back over here, click on that, and then down here you'll see where it says events. Or maybe if we just right click on it and choose properties, it says events. And the top one is action performed, and it shows the name of our method. But we don't want it to do anything. So just backspace over that. And so Parisa, yours has got several like that you might want to fix. Right now we've only added one event handler, and that was that button, and the rest of them are incorrect. So for each one of them you might right click on them, choose properties, go to events, and make sure that no events are listed. But you can see that there are a lot of events. If you want to make it do something every time a key is typed, you could attach that to a method. If you want to make it handle something being dragged to it, you could make it handle the mouse drag button. Okay. We need a button now that's going to calculate the values and put the results in those 3 things. So I'm going to double click on the calculate button, and if I get it right, there we go. It adds another event handler, J button 2 action performed. In a minute we're going to give these buttons better names than just J button 1 and J button 2, because that's pretty cryptic. Okay, we know how to write code that creates minimums and maximums and averages, but we could do this all in one loop rather than 2 or 3. Let's use a double as our tally. The reason I suggest that is so that we don't have to worry about integer division rounding down. Let's declare a int called minimum, which we will set equal to the first value of the array. Let's declare a int called maximum, which we will set to the first value of the array. And then let's write a for loop. Excuse me. For int. I'm going to make this one look exactly like the other one, even though I prefer to use I as my index value. For x is equal to 0, x is less than the counter, x plus plus, int I is equal to the array at element x. That's unnecessary, but makes it easier to read. And then total plus equals I. If min is greater than I, set min equal to I. If max is less than I, set max equal to I. Now we need to update those 3 fields once we get our for loop working. We could just print those 3 values out at this point to make sure they work. Let's do that first. System.out.print f %f for a floating point number space %d /n. Let's print out the total, the min, and the max. All this is going to do is show it in the output window. It's not going to actually put it on the frame. So when I run it, I'm going to type in some numbers. 1, add to array. 2, add to array. 3, add to array. Now I'm going to do calculate, and it should print down here that the total is 6, like you can see that. The minimum was 1 and the max is 3. So that gives me confidence that that loop is working. What is it called if you have an array but it's not completely filled with data? Did we use the term partially filled array yet? Well, we're going to use it now. A partially filled array is one that's not completely full of data. When we start off, this array doesn't have any useful data at all. It's all zeros. And then each time we add something to it, we're putting more data into it. Now, when we want to calculate the average, we don't want to divide by 10, if there's only one element in it. Because that would mean that, if you were grading exams and that person made 100, but then, your calculation showed that they had a 10% average, they'd be annoyed. So when you have a partially filled array, you have to keep a counter going that tells you how many elements in the array are valid. If you're using something different, some other kind of list structure rather than an array, you don't have to do that because those list structures themselves keep track of how many elements have been added. But that's what the counter is for, because we're using a partially filled array and we need to know how much of that is valid data, and then we assume that the rest of it is invalid. So when we run through it looking for our minimum and our maximum and calculating our total, we don't want to go from beginning to end. We want to go from the beginning up to the counter. If they've added 5 pieces of data, we want to process 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4 and ignore the rest of the array. So that's what we've done here. Okay, we have 3 text fields we need to update. Let's make some strings to hold them. String S1 is equal to an empty string plus that total. String S2 is equal to an empty string plus min. This is the cheaty way of turning numbers into strings. String S3 is equal to empty string plus max. Now we can set those text fields the same way we did the text area. This dot J text field 2, whoops, I typed it wrong. J text field 2 dot set text, and we're setting that one equal to S1 because we have we have text field 2, 3, and 4 on the bottom. We want to fill them up with 1, 2, and 3. If I numbered them consistently, 2, 3, and 4, it might have been better, or given them variables good names, that would have been a good idea. J text field 2, this dot J text field 2 is equal, or dot set text, set that one equal to the second string, S2. And this dot J text field 3
I don't think that's what we want.
dot set text S3.
It's not going to give us what we want. The min needs to go in text field 2. Text field 2 needs S2.
Okay,
Text field 3 needs S3.
I've goofed
And
this up.
S1 needs to be divided by the counter.
Yeah, you're right. I have not done all of the correct things yet. For one thing, this needs to be 2, 3, and 4, not 2, 2, and 3. So 2, 3, and 4. And I did not create the average. So I guess just total is equal to total divided by the counter would be the fastest way of calculating the average. Now the program's not going to work correctly if they haven't inserted any data before they click calculate. Maybe the code that I had in the sample rather than when I was winging it takes that into account. Not really. We could do that pretty easily. All right, add to array. I'm adding a 0, and a 30. Now when I press calculate, I would expect the max to be 30, the minimum to be 0, and the average to be 10.
You're just out of order.
Mine are out of order, which is what you were telling me. Minimum, maximum, average. Blah. Here's where I should have given better names. What is S1? S1 is the total. So let's make that string S total. S2 should be the minimum, so make that string S min. S3, let's change that to S max. Now go down here, and 2 is supposed to be the minimum, S min. 3 is supposed to be the max, S max. And JText field 4 is supposed to be S total, which really we should have stored in a new variable and called it average rather than total. Dumb name for it. Okay. I hope I started the recorder back when I was doing all this. Okay, good. All right. The takeaway, besides the fact that you can create these forms, is that when you're doing user interface design, what you're doing is you're creating objects, buttons and text fields and stuff like that, that are classes that Java gives you. And then you're attaching them to a frame or a dialog. There's another kind of thing you can do where it's a dialog. And then to get it to be wired together, you have to add listeners so that when the button is pressed, it will call the right code. And that is handled for us when we're doing it this way, but you would have to do it by hand. When you want to read from an object, you use .getText. When you want to write a value back to an object, you use .setText. Since we have a little bit more time, why don't we make it to where if we click calculate, it doesn't, well, I guess those results are too bad. Notice that if you divide by 0 but you're calculating a float, or one of your parameters is a float rather than an int, you don't get an exception like you do if you're dividing ints. I don't think we need to fix it. It might be fun to put a clear button though. That would wipe out the array.
If you wanted to set it so that you can just hit enter after typing in a number rather than clicking the add to array, you'd use the key pressed.
Let's figure that out. Go into design, click on this array, right click, do properties. We're going to look for an event. We wouldn't want key pressed.
So then you'd have to figure out which key you pressed.
I know it's easy. Let's Google it up. JText field event when press enter. Question, is it possible to detect when someone presses enter? A JText field was designed to use an action listener just like JButtons. Okay, this looks plausible.
Yeah, those only look good.
That's the one that I think I want to implement. I'm not digging the other ones. So, we're going to go back to here, and when a key is pressed, we want it to activate a method. Now, we don't have one yet, but we can click on this little down thing over here. Y'all saw how I got to this, right? Right-clicked, Properties, Events, look for key pressed. Wonder what the difference between pressed and typed is. And then go over here to where it says none and pull down to where it says JText field 1 key pressed. Click closed. Now we need to find that code again. Why did you do that? It has freaked out. Oh, now it's back. Okay. Now we have a new method, and we want to do this. If EVT, all lowercase, dot get key code with a capital K and a capital C, parentheses, is equal to key event, which we're going to have to add an import for, dot, and this is all caps, VK, virtual keyboard, I don't know what V stands for, VK underscore enter. And if they do that, we want to call our other method, JButton2 action performed. So I'm just going to scroll up, find JAction2 button performed, so I don't have to type it, although I could do this, you know, this dot JButton2 action performed. No, I want action button 1. And then pass the event into it. Now I need to fix this, add import for, and I'm getting an error here, incompatible types. That's too bad. Okay, we're going to do a little bit more. Go up to JButton1 action performed, highlight all of this code, and then do refactor, introduce method, and call it add. Easy name. And then click OK. And we can see that now when JButton1 is clicked, it just calls the add function. Well, that's all that this is going to do too. Then scroll back down to JText field 1 key pressed, and when it is pressed, call the add function. And it would be nice if after you type something, it reset that text field. It put the cursor back in that text field. But I think I'm not going to bother doing that. That's just another nicety. I'm wondering if this is going to work. Type in a 20 here, add to array, 30. You see what I mean? It'd be nice if it went back to that text field so I didn't have to keep. It'd be nice if it cleared it out and put the cursor back there. Well, clearing it out is easy. After we call add, just do this dot JText field 1 dot set text to an empty string. So you type 100 and hit enter. Hey, that actually worked. I'm not sure why it's going back to that one again when it wasn't before, to my knowledge, but it seemed to make it work. Alright, I think that's enough. No, it's not. One more thing I want to illustrate. Sorry. Go back here, and this is a really terrible name for a button, this add to array button. Right click on it, do change variable name, and instead of JButton1, call it JButton underscore add or something like that. And then click OK. Do the same thing for the calculate button. Right click on it where it says change variable name. Instead of making it say JButton2, make it say JButton underscore calculate. Now when you go and look at your source code, those button methods have better names. Calculate action performed. Add action performed. We could do the same thing for text field 1, text field 2, text field 3, and so on. You can go back to design, right click on the top text field, do change variable name, and instead of J text field 1, call it J text field underscore input. Then when you go and you look at the source, whenever we're pulling data out of it, it looks better. We're saying our string is equal to J text field underscore input. Now that's enough. It's a good idea to name all your controls with actually valid variable names rather than just J text field 1, J text field 2, and so on. All right. Go ahead and just upload that Java file into the Dropbox and we are done.